David, I'm sure all the people have been waiting, to hear from you and so on and so forth. Like I said earlier, if they couldn't hear me, but I'll say it quickly, I've had the greatest pleasure in my life to meet a man such as yourself. I don't creep, I don't do anything like that with people. What I say is the truth. And I've been hugely impressed by your ideas, your theories, and this, that, and the other. You've come an awful long way. You're well renowned in many, many ways. Sometimes loved in a big style, sometimes feared, sometimes middle of the road. It's just lovely to have you on. At this moment in time, David, because you've been so gracious to come on, what is your feelings? I'm going to ask you a question. You're not expecting this, okay? Can you tell me, I know you'll tell me honestly as well, do you believe in spirit?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I've done all my best jokes now. Well, we thought we were on air, but weren't. Done all my best stories, so it's going to get really boring from now on. For me, Derek, what we are, what the I is a state of awareness, a state of being aware.
Yeah.
And all this illusion and almost diversion we call form of race and culture. These are not who we are. These are our experiences. Yeah. Now, we can potentially expand our awareness, what we are aware of, out into infinity, and therefore tap into endless other realities, endless other kind of fountains of knowledge, of intuitive knowing, of inspiration, of insight. Or, and I think this is what is systematically done, we can become so focused in the five senses that we think the I is the label, the name, the income bracket, the family history, the life story, the race, the religion, the background. And when we do that, of course, we see ourselves in terms of limitation. We see ourselves in terms of I can't, because that's how it seems. We also see ourselves as apart from everyone else and everything apart from everything else. Whereas what my view is that if you get to that point of I, that point of simple state of awareness, and don't self-identify with the labels and see them as experiences, you can reach levels of awareness where you realize that everything is connected to everything else and everything is an expression of everything else. So I would say that you and Paul and I now are different points of attention within the same state of infinite awareness. And how focused, myopic, or how expanded that point of attention is depends basically on our self-identity. And of course, what's happening all the time from cradle to grave, it's one of the things I've written in detail about, is if you look at a human life, it's basically a perceptual download. From coming into this world to leaving, we are constantly bombarded. I call it the postage stamp consensus. It's a narrow band of a sense of the possible, what is, what isn't, what's possible, what's not possible, a sense of reality, which is basically, like I say, myopic. And people live in this channel of perception, and it's all they get from the mainstream media. It's what they get from the mainstream everything. It's what they get from the so-called education system. It's overwhelmingly what they get from their parents, because their parents have been through the system and downloaded the perception. And it's also defended by this strange human trait we've fallen for, which is the crime of being different. So if you are different to this perceived postage stamp normal, this perceptual download, then you're either mad or bad or both. And you've got this constant peer pressure to conform to this communal sense of normal. And very early on in my life, I'm sure in yours, I started to question this sense of normal. And I just knew there was something beyond it. And what's happened in the last 30 years is, especially, at the start when I went through all that ridicule, is I stepped off the postage stamp and I thought, I'm going to explore possibility outside of the norm. And when you do, what you realize is there is a whole panorama, a whole vista of knowledge, awareness, insight, understanding, waiting for anybody who will decide that they're going to seek their own truth and not just download someone else's. And I think it's an arrogance beyond belief if people just took a breath and looked at it, that anyone should insist that someone else conforms to their belief system. What would happen, and it is happening. I mean, I've never seen anything like it in the last 2 years, number of people that are looking at things that they never looked at before. But if we would set ourselves free and allow us to explore possibility without rigid barriers and fences and prison cells that say you can't believe that, you can't say that, you can't have this opinion, then there would be an absolute unleashing of human potential and human understanding, the like of which we've never seen in the same time period. But of course, that few which wants to control the many could not do that if the many were in that state of expanded awareness and free thinking exploration. The way the few control the many is to get the many to basically have a communal belief system that is narrow, that gets people to see themselves as little me instead of infinite me, and that sees everything as apart from everything else. So you've got all the fault lines of divide and rule to set the target population at war with itself. And therefore, the last thing this force wants is free-thinking, open-minded, open-hearted people. It wants closed-minded, rigid thinking, and also, at the same time, people who, having accepted the rigidity, then insist that everyone else accepts the rigidity as well. Thus, the human race has become the prisoner and the prison warder of its own sense of reality. It's like I've said many times, we laugh at sheep because we say, sheep follow the one in front, just follow the shepherd without question. And anyone that gets out of line, the sheepdog comes, symbolizing fear to get them back in line. But humanity has been allowed itself to become so programmed that we've dispensed with a sheepdog. We don't need a sheepdog. We keep each other in line. I've challenged that for 30 years because I will not conform to what someone else tells me to think. I'll think what I want to think. Thank you very much.
Good man. Can I ask you another question? I hope it's not too far reaching. I know you'll answer me very truthfully. Do you believe in the words I use, the infinite and infinite power? Do you believe in there is a power? And if there is a power beyond that, okay, do you believe in a creative form that's created us? Do you believe we come from water? David, I'm always interested to find out what you think.
Well, I think what exists is a state of consciousness.
Yes.
And there are different levels of this consciousness in the sense of its self-awareness. This consciousness can express itself as being an awareness of the fact that it is all that is, has been, and ever can be. Yep. Or it can perceive itself as Ethel on the checkout. I've got no power. I'm just Ethel. Nothing ever happens to me. And these are two states of perception. And when you look at the stadium on which life is played out, it's the stadium called perception. Because if you have a perception, for instance, of I'm Ethel on the checkout, you'll have a certain experience. That perception will create a feedback loop of producing Ethel on the checkout life. Mm-hmm. But if Ethel re-self-identified and realized that she is a point of attention within infinite awareness having an experience called Ethel, then that expansion of self-identity comes from and produces an expansion of awareness, the amount of the scale of this consciousness that you're now tapping into. And that creates a very different feedback loop between perception and experience. In other words, life transforms, starts to become an adventure rather than just an existence, just a survival. And you start to realize that because perception is dictating experience, we are the ones in control of our lives. However, if we don't realize that, then, and we're being manipulated by a force that does, then what it can do is download our perception through this process I'm talking about from cradle to grave.
Yes.
And if we accept that download of perception, which I call the postage stamp consensus, then that feedback loop with experience will be on the basis of the postage stamp consensus. It will be a very limited feedback loop producing a very limited possibility of experience. Because I remember, when my mind exploded in 1991, that my life dramatically changed. When I re-self-identified from being David Icke, born in Leicester in 1952, to being an infinite state of awareness, having an experience as David Icke, born in Leicester in 1952, life started to become this extraordinary synchronistic adventure in which amazing, quote, coincidences were happening. Some people would call it miraculous things were happening. But they're not. It's just that you were interacting, this interaction between perception and experience was happening in a much more expanded way. Thus, the experience you could have became much more expanded. Instead of every day being the same and a drudge, it became an adventure. Not because you were suddenly better than anyone else, but you were just interacting with possibility and probability in a much more expanded way. And this is what happens when you opened your mind. I mean, I'll tell you a story, a quick one. These sort of things have happened to me for nearly 30 years. And they almost become matter of fact. They've happened so often. But there was one that really struck me. There's a film crew that from California, from Los Angeles, making a film about my life and work. And they came over to film me over the last week, doing some talks and also come to the Isle of Wight. And I obviously I'm talking about freedom. I'm talking about the need to be free and the fact that our freedom's being taken away and all this stuff. And I took them right at the end of the day to ride pier on the Isle of Wight. Because we were just talking about, when I was a kid and I used to come here on holiday, I used to stand on that pier and I used to watch the steam trains coming in and out, going up and down the pier. It was lovely. And right next to the pier, which you look down on from the pier, was the beach where I used to sit as a kid when I was on holiday. Just a little beach next to the pier. And when we were filming, we were talking about this. One of the film crew shouted, "Have a look at this," and walked across, looked down from the pier onto that beach where I used to sit back in the 50s and 60s. And there was a mother and two children who they were just finishing drawing two massive words in the sand, both of them freedom. And the chances of that, the fact that we were there at the time, they were even in England at the time, it could have been another time. The fact that it was the beach where I sat as a kid, that the film up to that point, I've been talking about freedom and the need to preserve freedom from what is happening, which is incredible levels of censorship now. And it all coming together. And I don't know why they did it. It was just a mother and two kids, and they were writing two words, freedom, twice, massively in the beach. But these things have been happening to me year after year after year after year. Not because I'm special. No, we're all points of attention, the same consciousness. But because once you start freeing your mind and freeing your perceptions to flow into realms of possibility that the postage stamp consensus keeps you from, then your life starts to produce these things, because that's the way life should be. You know, humanity goes through life because of this perceptual programming, symbolically with its hands tied behind its back and a ball and chain on each foot. We express in our lives a tiny fraction of who we are and our own potential to dictate our own experience, because we've been manipulated not to know how that dynamic operates between perception and experience. This is why someone who thinks they're little me has a little me life. Someone who thinks they're infinite me has infinite me life. But the only difference between them is two different perceptions. And it saddens me and also drives me on to see what people could be if only they would free their minds from the program.
Absolutely. You know, I agree with wholeheartedly so much of that. I've learned so much in that description and form of what you said in this short space of time. Paul, I'm really sure there's something that you'd really like to either ask or put to David, something that's been on your mind as a medium, as a man, as a free thinker. Is there anything you want to speak to?
Well, I really want to kind of follow on more about what David was just saying. I mean, David, here in Portsmouth, I have two development classes where I teach my students about becoming a medium. And listening to what you said, in fact, we only had a very similar conversation with one of the classes yesterday, where I say to them, if you can free your mind, very similar to what you've been saying, if you can free your mind, if you can free yourself from your restraints and who you believe you are, you don't need me, because you're going to be able to do it yourself, and it's going to come.
What I would say to people, what I do say to people, is just change your self-identity. Just do it for a month and see how life changes. Where instead of going through the next month saying I'm Bill Brown, drive a bus in Portsmouth, I am infinite awareness, all that is, has been, and ever can be, having an experience as Bill Brown.
Yeah.
And it's because then the experience ceases to be the governor, and consciousness awareness, the self-identity with consciousness, becomes the governor. Because once you fall for the trap of self-identifying with your experience and all these endless labels, and of course the labels are subdividing now into smaller and smaller bubbles of self-identity, then you're in the realm of limitation. Everything seems apart from everything else. Everything seems limited. Everything seems I can't. When you believe in for instance, in the world being solid and physical, then what does that tell you? That tells you that virtually nothing is possible. When you realize that actually this world we think is so solid is actually a holographic illusion which we're decoding, then you realize that what we think of and experience as limitation of physicality is actually a malleable a malleable reality that we can change in ways that people don't think that it's possible.
Where do people start? You know, I'm listening with bated breath here. It's wonderful. Where do we start? How can we start? How can we start from a singular, listen to your thoughts, to make it a big collective across the world? Let's go from one country to the next. How do we go about it? What's the simplistic way? Is there a way?
Well,
is there a simple way?
There's many levels of this. First of all, it starts with the individual point of attention within infinite awareness, which we give labels to. It has to start there. I mean, so often, you know, people want change in the world, and they sit there waiting for the cavalry to come over the hill. Well, find yourself a mirror, because that's the freaking cavalry. All right, that's the cavalry. So it has to start with the I, but because everything is frequency, when you start resonating on a different frequency, and this is what happens, you know, little me perception is a frequency. It's a band of frequency. That's what you're giving off. When you're in a state of depression, you are in a low frequency, or a state of fear, you're in a low frequency. That's why people say, oh, I feel so heavy today. Yes, because your frequency is low, and therefore your energetic field is not vibrating quickly, and it has the feel of density. And then when people feel joy or positivity, what do they say? Oh, I feel so light. Because you've got a high frequency and your energy field is vibrating much quicker, and that interacts with the sea of possibility and probability within the band of frequency that we're resonating on. So everything changes when we change our perception, particularly perception of self-identity, but something else happens. Once you do that, you start resonating a different frequency. You know, what we're doing, it's like an interactive virtual reality game. In fact, in many ways, on one level, that's pretty much what it is. But the key is interactive. You know, when we're moving through this sea of possibility and probability, it is impacting upon us. You know, if you want to change the fish, change all the fish at the same time, change the sea. And we're moving in through this sea of energy and possibility and probability, what I call the cosmic internet or cosmic Wi-Fi. But we are also impacting upon it by our state of being. It's an interaction. So once you start resonating on a different frequency, what people call beating to a different drum, you start impacting on the energetic field around you. And you can start impacting on other people who start picking up this frequency and becoming affected by it. And it becomes like, it becomes something that becomes exponential. And I've seen it. Derek. When I first had my awakening in the early 1990s, I met a series of what you might call psychic people. Only one of which, in the early days, I actually sought out. The rest just came, again, synchronistically into my life. But there was a common theme, and this common theme was that there was a vibrational change coming. There was a frequency change coming that was going to awaken humanity up from its slumber, from its coma. And that people who were more awake were going to be affected first, and then eventually more and more people were going to be affected. And they were going to start seeing the world differently. They were going to start seeing themselves differently. And, you know, at that time, of course, 1990, 91, there was no evidence of that at all. But when I look now, the last couple of years, I've been going literally around the world, talking on every continent. And I've been around Britain in the last month or so. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. People are opening their minds to things that they would have brushed aside with a wave of their hand not so long ago. I can see it changing. So this vibrational change is impacting upon people, and as you tune into it and become affected by it, you start to resonate with it. You start to then become basically a vehicle for its communication. You start resonating on its frequency, and the whole thing moves on. And this is where we're going. This is why. What we're looking at the moment is a massive fork in the road, because if I only looked at the research that I do into how the world is controlled by a few and what the agenda is, and how connecting the human brain to AI has been the end game all along, so that human perception, instead of being manipulated, has no need to be manipulated anymore, because AI becomes human perception. That's the game. This is why Silicon Valley is an area of the world that I call the devil's playground, because the Silicon Valley giants are only fronts for the Pentagon and the intelligence networks in the United States and wider. So that's what they are. That's why they're data gathering. That's why they're censoring. They're doing it on behalf of military and intelligence networks, because that's who set these giants up. So if I only looked at
the Illuminati and so-called people that have been named of higher position controlling the world, David, can I ask that question?
Yeah, well, that's exactly what's going on. But it goes way out. In the end, you're going into the realms of a force that's not human. But if I only looked at my research in that side of things, then I might say it's over. It's over, ladies and gentlemen. Enjoy it while you can, because it's over. We're finished. But this other side, this awakening, this energetic alarm clock that's going off, this breaking down of this density that people have been living in, is what is going to change this. And we're at the fork in the road now, where if we go on as we are, we'll live in a global fascist Orwellian state within 20 years. And I'm probably being optimistic. But if this awakening goes on and expands and expands and expands, then the world will go in a completely different direction. Because it's only going in the direction of control, because humanity's perception is most people don't realize it's all planned and all systematically made to happen. But on the other side, if you think you're little me, I have no power, even if you know what's going on, you'll say, well, there's nothing we can do about it. But of course, there is, when you know the true nature of the power we have. But only if you do know that can this be headed off. Because, this is the point. Knowledge is knowledge. Yeah. There's not good knowledge and bad knowledge. There is knowledge. I can see Paul here sitting in front of a microphone. A microphone is neutral. It's not good or bad. It's what you do with it. Yes. And it's the same with knowledge. And this hidden hand, as I would call it, at its core, has hoarded the knowledge about the nature of reality and how our perceptions manifest as our experience. So it knows that if it can control perception, it can control human experience. And this is why this network controls mainstream science, not least through the funding and other institutions. It wants mainstream science. Of course, quantum physics has thrown a spanner in that works to a large extent. Yes. But basically, it wants mainstream science to present a view of the world in which everything is solid and physical, everything is apart from everything else, and there is nothing beyond it, basically. Because, people like you, in what you do, mainstream science would say you're a crackpot or a hoaxer or whatever. Yes. Because, and to be fair to mainstream science, from their perception of reality, which is all they've downloaded through their education system and through their scientific specialization, that sense of reality that they have downloaded cannot understand how it's possible to connect with other levels of reality that you can't see. Because to them, if you can't see it, touch it, taste it, hear it, then it can't exist. Absolutely. That's the prison they're living in. This is the 5 cents prison, the postage stamp consensus I'm talking about. And it's ironic, though it says so much about the world, that this postage stamp consensus is most believed in and most worshipped by academia, by science, by mainstream medicine, by journalists, by politicians. Thus, the institutions that dictate human society are the most programmed in terms of this perception of reality that is basically the size of a pea. But that which is manipulating is aware of the greater picture. And if people just imagine this, a few people know what reality is, they know how it works, they know how humans interact with it and how they're affected by it, how humans are affected by it, how perception equals experienced reality, and your target population doesn't know. What a position of unbelievable power that is. And that's why mystics and psychics and mediums and seers throughout history have been targeted by the establishment of the day and still are to this day.
One more question, if you don't mind. It's been on my mind since the last time I made contact with you. It's been a while. Is that, and I really, it's come back to me. David, I know you'll tell the truth. I know you'll tell me the truth and the listeners. I've had an amazing, just this year, in this last tour, the Love, Life and Laughter tour, Derek Acorah, this year. I've had more people, why I don't know, both men and women. When I finish a show, a spiritual demonstration, go outside, do the signings like you do, and photographs and what have you on your tours. And an awful lot of people have been asking me this one question. And it's an experience they've had. It's mostly been with the men more than women. And they're being like younger men rather than the elder people, more younger than 50. And they're saying they're experiencing the same things. And I'm going, I don't know anything about this. I'll ask David, because I'm sure you'll be able to pin it wherever it is. When you've talked about consciousness and you've talked about, what's going on outside ourselves. And what they've said is, and they've not known each other, they've not heard one saying this in front of each other. It's different nights and different places. And it is saying, I get an amazing, strange, very strange feeling. I could be sitting at home, ready to have my dinner in the evening, be watching a bit of television. I could have gone out, took the dog for a walk, I've come in, and all of a sudden, my ears go funny, as if it's like something's changed. I suppose it's like when you go to altitude on a plane, and your ears pop, and the feeling's like, and then all of a sudden, a tingling feeling, below the earlobes and what have you, and then they're thinking what they were thinking about changes altogether, and they're thinking about something else. Is that control, David?
Well, it depends what they were thinking about before and what they were thinking about afterwards. But there's a common theme here. I mean, what are the ears doing? What are the 5 senses in general doing? But certainly the ears, it's obvious. They are taking waveform vibrational information, turning it into electrical information and communicating it to the brain. So when the frequency changes around them, one thing that can be affected is the ears, because the ears are suddenly interacting, decoding a vibration, a frequency that's changed, and thus the impact upon them will change. And if these are energies, frequencies that the body is not used to decoding, then it can give you a strange feeling, because you won't have had the feeling before because you've not been decoding those energies before. And there's so many things that happen to people when energetic fields around them, electromagnetic fields, whatever, change. I've had experiences early on when I first began to realize my life was changing 30 years ago, of the energy around me changing to the point where it was like a spider's web was on my face, or the hairs on my neck stood up. And what is that? That's an electromagnetic field change. This is what happens when you're in a big football crowd of excited people, and they're generating this electromagnetic energy with their emotions and with their excitement, and you feel it, and your hair stands on end. So it's an energetic thing. Now, on going to the other part of what you said, it's been very clearly been known for decades now. I've done a lot of research into this, and others have too, and there's been many whistleblowers that have come out over the years, that this inner circle, shall we say, particularly working through the military and military technological development. There's an organization in America called DARPA, which is the technological development arm of the Pentagon, and I would call it evil, except evil might sue for defamation of character. It's that kind of organization, right? So they have had the ability for decades to fire frequencies at people, or put people in electromagnetic fields of certain frequencies that sync with the frequencies on which the brain decodes information and processes information. And in doing so, the brain processes the information in the field or in the projection. And the person believes that they're their own thoughts and they're their own feelings, when in fact they're just decoding information that's been provided for them on the frequency that the brain works. And so this certainly happens. And this leads me to a very, very important thing I always mention whenever I can. They're in the process of bringing in something at the moment called 5G. This is a transformation of the Wi-Fi smartphone communication system on a ultra high frequency microwave frequencies. And it's going to be devastating. And this is why they're openly saying they're doing no testing, because they know if it's tested, it will never get permission. So they're giving it permission anyway. And they're starting trials in Britain now. They're doing some trials. It came out in the paper last week or the week before without telling anybody. And the effect is already being seen. In America, they're rolling it out, calling it trials. In fact, they've said they're going to roll it out right across America. And this has big time the capacity to impact on human thought. See, when you do your work, you're tuning into frequencies, aren't you? You're tuning into frequencies that are outside our perceived reality.
Yes.
Well, 5G can provide energetic fields like Wi-Fi fields with thoughts, perceptions, etc., encoded in them, which people then decode, believing they're their own thoughts, but they're actually basically literally downloading some Wi-Fi field. And they've worked out that people have documented this over the years. They've worked out that certain emotion, well, every emotion, depression, anxiety, all of them, they're frequencies. And they even worked out the frequency for rioting. So if they want to riot, they fire these frequencies across the area they want to generate the riot in, and everyone starts to get wound up and wound up and wound up, and then they go along and they provide a light for the touch paper, and that wound up population then riots. This is done electromagnetically.
It's quite frightening, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'll tell you what 5G is like and what we're dealing with. In America, they have technology, police and military, which they fire out from vehicles to disperse crowds. And it's 5G frequency at a higher level of power. And it disperses crowds because when people are hit by it, they have the feeling that their skin's on fire. This is the stuff they want to. They are wanting to roll out as the communication system for Wi-Fi and phones and all the rest of it. So the bottom line of the question is frequency will have that effect that they're talking about. Whether it's frequency of an energetic field that's positive to them, or whether it's an energetic field that's negative to them, well, that we can discuss on the basis of their experience. But this is how it's done. And again, if the population doesn't know any of this, but the inner hand actually does, it's a position of incredible power. And that's why this information is so dangerous to that which is behind all this. They don't want the public to know.
And sorry, David, to just jump in here, only because this is fascinating for me, and only because I currently have 5G in my home, and it's now on my brand new phone that I've just bought.
Oh, well done.
So, and I've just kind of looked at it and gone, I don't want to use that.
No, the other thing about 5G, you see, there's a few things here, quite topical things, is 5G doesn't travel very far. You know. Up to this point, they've had the big towers pouring out the Wi-Fi and all that stuff from big towers. That's 4G, 3G, and all this other stuff they call it. But 5G doesn't travel very far. So what they're having to introduce, and they're doing it in America, is tiny antenna that go on lampposts all the way down the street, outside people's homes, in people's backyards. And the other thing that it doesn't do, it doesn't go through dense physical objects very well. So, for instance, a line of mature urban trees in a street would be 5G's worst nightmare. Well, they're cutting thousands of trees down in Sheffield under a ludicrous excuse, and the people campaigning against it have uncovered documents that point to the fact they want to cut down another 17,000. I don't know if you saw it this week, but the train companies, the rail company that runs the track, wants to cut down extraordinary numbers of trees alongside railways, right?
Yes. I read this. Yes.
And I would say to people, if this tree cutting of mature trees comes to your town, the alarm bell should ring, because 5G couldn't operate effectively in a tree-lined road. So this is what we're dealing with. But of course, most people wouldn't know this because the mainstream media doesn't cover it. Just because the mainstream media is the propaganda arm of the postage stamp consensus.
Yes. Oh, it's amazing. I mean, what do you make of that, Paul?
I'm sure you know, possibly you've been here yourself as well, Derek. We don't have a lot of trees. We're a heavily dense, built-up area.
No,
but yeah, we've got 5G here.
Yeah, well,
it's I don't want to use the word scary, but I'm sitting here going, wow, this is in my house at the moment.
Yeah, well, they wanted to do a quote trial on the Isle of Wight of 5G. And a lot of people started kicking up a fuss, and they're not going to have it here now. They say it, they aren't anyway. But they are having them around the country, including Liverpool, by the way, part of Liverpool.
Really?
Yeah, and there was a story 2 weeks ago. When I was going around on this speaking tour in the last month, I was talking about this as part of the talk, and a couple of days after the first two talks, there was a story in the mainstream about Gateshead, where a scientist in Gateshead was pointing out that people were having insomnia, nosebleeds. There was an increase in stillbirths, and he realised that without telling anybody, they put 5G transmitters on the lampposts. So that wasn't psychosomatic, where it's 5G. There's all these problems, psychosomatic. No one knew in Gateshead that they were there, but the effects started to show themselves. So this is very, very important, because the last thing they want us to know is the real reason for it. And again, what you do in terms of frequency and tuning into frequencies, this hidden hand knows how all that works. It knows that everything is a frequency, and the frequency we operate on is vital to the experiences we have. And what they're doing now, because of that, with this technology, is messing with the frequencies. I mean, Derek, I was born in 1952, and the technological radiation in the atmosphere, in the sea of energy that we're living in, compared with 1952, is through the roof and off the planet. We're living in a totally different energetic environment than we were not long ago because of this technological radiation. Now, if you affect the sea, you affect the fish, and that's what they're doing. And this is why it's important. This again, it's another important part of this. Why we need to go to a higher frequency and resonate on a higher frequency. Because when you go through this process of reevaluating self-identity, and you start to identify with the infinite I instead of the label I, you can reach a frequency of resonance that is not affected by this stuff. But if you're pulled into lower frequencies of low vibrational emotion, which of course the system is there to do in abundance, then you get pulled into this frequency band in which you are affected by it.
Yes. Oh, it's absolutely stunningly amazing. I've listened with absolute strong inner and outer ears tonight. This has been wonderful for me to listen. I always knew so much about your understanding of things, David. Speaking to you after a certain amount of time strengthens my belief in most of the stuff that you are talking about. Not only do you know it's true, it is true. It feels right to me. It is so. And this is why I wanted you on the show so strongly, more than any other guest. I wanted people to listen to you. I know they listen to you all over the world, and I couldn't care less what authority states this or that or the other. I'm just absolutely thrilled that my listeners are listening to you, taking on board your truth, and let's hope that they gain, I'm sure they will, gain something from it, maybe quite a lot. I don't know how Paul feels. I'm sure he does. It's been wonderful listening to you, wonderful connecting with you, wonderful. Keep on doing your stuff. Keep on working and giving the proof, because I back you 100%, David.
I wouldn't know any other way. You know what I mean? Do you know something? I've met so many people over the last 30 years who've come into this arena of information and research and then disappeared. And I've never understood it. They've said, it's too hard, or I'm going to spend more time with my family. But the thing is, once you know what is happening, you can't walk away. All you can do is constantly redouble your efforts. And the other thing is that, I am absolutely fascinated by what is reality. Who are we? Where are we? What's going on? And so there's no way that I'll ever stop doing it.
No.
David, so just very quickly, because we haven't got a lot of time left in the show, what would be, let's just say, hypothetically speaking, the masses, we all woke up, we all could see reality for what it really is. What would your perception be of that reality? How would our reality suddenly look? From how different would it be from how it is now? And I know you haven't got long to answer that, but
great question.
Well, we don't know until we experience it, because if perception equals reality or experienced reality, then if we haven't experienced that reality, then it will be something that would be difficult to answer. What would change is the way we live our lives. For instance, just on one level, if we all realize we are expressions of each other, and this is just a transitory series of experiences in a tiny, tiny frequency band that we call the world. Because we don't live in a world, we live in a range of frequency. We live in a range of information, which we're decoding into what appears to be a world, which is very different. So just realizing that everything is not apart from everything else, that's the illusion. And we're all having transitory experiences, but we're all the same consciousness, different points of attention within the same consciousness. Again, fault lines of divide and rule would fall massively. enormously when you realize that they're illusions. You're black, okay, and I'm white, yeah, and you're this or you're that, yeah, but that's just an experience for 70 years and 10 or less or more. That's all it is. So it's not an I. And once your race and your culture and your income bracket and your color and your life story ceases to be an I, but an experience of the real I, then all these fault lines of divide and rule just start to crumble because they're illusions. And so the world would change dramatically. And also, of course, because once we realize that reality is malleable, that actually the base form of this reality is waveform information, like cosmic Wi-Fi. And we're decoding from that Wi-Fi field through the five senses this holographic illusion that appears so physical but isn't, as quantum physics has shown for one. Then the possibilities for changing reality, even in this apparently physical world, become enormous. Because you look at mainstream science, and the reason it will say over and over and over and over again, it's not possible, is because it perceives the world to be physical and solid. And in a physical, solid world, those things are not possible. But it's not physical and solid, so they are possible. I mean, look at the placebo effect, for instance, in medicine. The placebo effect is simply the mind changing reality from a perception that the placebo is going to change reality. It's not.
Yes.
But the perception that the placebo will work changes the body through perception equaling experience on the basis of what they believe the placebo will do when it won't. And so once you realize this this foundation interaction between perception and reality, everything becomes possible. Health becomes possible. Oh, you can't cure that. What do you mean you can't cure that? The mind can cure anything. And by the way, create anything of a health situation. This is why when people get into realms of anxiety and fear and stress and depression, it can have an effect on their health. Why? Because it's disabling them vibrationally through the distortion of the distorted emotional states, which are basically an electrical frequency charge going through the body. But you can make the body ill, diseased, or you can make the body well, balanced by your state of mind, which is your state of perception. So, I mean, it just opens this vast vista of possibility to create a human society that is as different from this one as our minds can perceive it to be, really.